International observers have arrived to try and stop the bloodshed that has claimed more than 11,000 lives since an uprising began there over a year ago. Just to remind you of who my guests are tonight. Vincent Floriani is a spokesperson for the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Ariel Colonomas is a director of research at CNRS. We're also joined by Jeffrey Laurenti in New York. He's a senior fellow at the Century Foundation. Philippe Belopion is the United Nations Director at Human Rights Watch. He's also in New York. And we're also joined on the line now by Najib El Gadban. He is a member of the Syrian National Council. He's also, I should point out, the former Minister of Communication for the former president of Syria, Hafez al-Assad. He's also close to the Syrian Muslim Brotherhood. Thanks for being with us tonight. He joins us on the line from the United States. Given your previous career, you, more than most people, should know how a dictator can survive despite having committed atrocities.
Well, let me correct that. Actually, I was not the former communication minister. I don't know where you got that, but I could still answer the question.
Apologies, we've been given the wrong information about you. My apologies. Do tell us what you used to do.
Well, I'm actually a professor of political science and a kind of a veteran in the opposition for a long time, for both Assad, the father and the son, and now active member with the Syrian National Council and teach Middle East politics at the University of Arkansas. But anyway, I think what we see now is attempt again by the Bashar al-Assad to gain more time and try to find ways around the observers mission because this regime has not demonstrated any willingness to offer any political solution. All they know is the crackdown, the security so-called option, and that's what we see. So while they accepted the Annan plan, while they agreed to receive some of the early observers, they continue to bombard cities. And they are, in fact, pursuing activists. They have arrested many prominent activists over the last couple of days, all in violation of what they agreed on.
Now, some people say that the Syrian National Council is actually making the situation worse. They are very close to the Free Syrian Army, who are defected Syrian soldiers who are now fighting Assad's troops. People say that what began as a peaceful protest over a year ago has now turned into an armed struggle.
I think there's some truth to that, but the Syrian National Council is making its utmost to actually make this mission very successful. Our main concern is to stop the killing, the repression, and that's included in all of the initiatives. That's why we work with the Arab League, we work with the Security Council, and of course the General Assembly. And so there's really no truth whatsoever that we are trying to make the situation any worse. Now, yes, the Free Syrian Army was in fact created to protect civilians who for 6 months did not oppose this regime by, military ways. And it happened at one point when people decided to take up weapons to defend themselves in the face of continued killing. The killing has not stopped since this revolution began on March 17 a year ago. So yes, right now we have that, and in fact, the Free Syrian Army, in addition to the activists, have committed to make this mission successful. Anything that would lead to the stop of the killing of civilians is something.
All right. What about allegations made by Human Rights Watch that the Syrian opposition has also been engaged in torture? To quote, it says there is increasing evidence of kidnappings, the use of torture, and executions by armed Syrian opposition members.
In fact, yes, we worked with the Human Rights Watch. We issued a report condemning any violations of human rights, and particularly those few incidents with Human Rights Watch documented. And we were very clear that we are going to continue to oppose that kind of behavior. We are opposing a repressive regime that's ruled Syria for more than 40 years now. And of course, that would take away, some of those actions by some members who are not, in fact, totally, follow the leadership of the even Free Syrian Army, and we are in every meeting with them. We urge them to stick to the Geneva agreements, to follow and observe human rights when they deal with the soldiers of the other side.
Right. With all due respect, that's what you're saying that you want, but there are signs that you've lost control of the situation on the ground, and that actually there are armed fighters taking the law into their own hands and carrying out atrocities, playing right into the hands of Bashar al-Assad, who talks about armed groups, because they are now armed groups, are they not?
Well, that's really unfair to say. As I said, this has been totally defensive, the scope of these operations by the Free Syrian Army so far. And most of their work was to protect civilians while they were demonstrating. And so it's not really the same to say like a whole army, the Assad army, which has been bombarding city like Homs for over a month now, which killed more than 6,000 in that city, killed 13,000 overall, and caused the maybe more than now 100,000 refugees, more than 120,000 detainees. So for some to be able to defend themselves, which is legitimate by international law, by all standards. So I don't think it's really fair. However, if there are violations of human rights, we condemn them. We know they come from any source. Particularly, we are in the SNC. We are a political group. We are not a military group. We're trying to have control over the Free Syrian Army. We are trying our best to restrain them from kind of engaging in anything which would take away the high moral ground that the Syrian people gained throughout this revolution.
All right, Najib Al-Ghadban, many thanks indeed for joining us, Najib Al-Ghadban from the Syrian National Council, and apologies for misrepresenting you at the beginning there. If I could turn to you, Vincent, is France sure that it wants to back the Syrian National Council? Are these the people that France would like to see come to power in Syria if and when Assad is removed?
Well, it's not only France, it's the whole international community. In the meeting in Istanbul, the international community said that, or encouraged the opposition to unite under the umbrella of the Syrian National Council. We are talking to all opposition groups that are willing to bring about Syria that would be truly democratic, respecting human rights, the rights of the minorities. So this is basically what we are trying to achieve, supporting the opposition, encouraging them to have a political platform that would help Syria to become democratic.
Jeffrey Laurenti in New York, it's becoming less and less of a black and white situation, isn't it? Given that Human Rights Watch has condemned the rebels, they are getting arms. It's being reported from Saudi Arabia, from Qatar, and they too are not willing to respect this ceasefire.
Well, as in most situations, this is not a black and white, clearly one side virtuous, the other side evil. There are all kinds of shades of gray, as you have in most conflicts. Look, the Syrian government, the Ba'ath regime, has as its default position just repressing with whatever means necessary any kind of opposition. However, that proved, over the past 2 months, to be not quite successful, and even its closest patrons have been putting pressure on it. And so we see now the hope of some gradual diminution, or better yet, a very quick diminution of violence. The tough part is going to be the political negotiation. The UN is working with, as the self-styled Friends of Syria, to help organize the opposition as a coherent group to be able to sit down in negotiations around a table with those representing different elements of the existing regime in Damascus. But there you're going to have the toughest part of all, trying to find some way of each side being able to hold something of its ambitions or its hopes for the country. And this is where Foreign Minister Juppé's analysis of the impact of sanctions already at squeezing Syria's reserves becomes important, because when you go into a negotiating process that lasts for another half year, if not longer, it is that economic pressure on the regime that will give some additional bargaining leverage, because so many of its security leaders still have that instinct to just crush them and try to stamp them out. And it is this kind of leverage that will help in a political negotiating process for all sides, together with their outside supporters leaning heavily on them, to find some way forward to reach an accommodation so the country does not go down the drain in a huge bonfire of conflict. And that's why the Security Council's unity is crucial. We've gotten more in the past few weeks with a unified Security Council than we had with 9 months of lecturing by the Western powers and anti-Assad Arab governments.
Jeffrey's right, isn't he? We are now at least at a point where everyone on the Security Council is on board.
Yeah, sure. And also coming back to the other point, which was the the violation of the rules of war by the opposition against Assad. I mean, this is not a surprise. I mean, if Assad violates the rules of war, violates a ceasefire, how can you expect that the other party, a political unit that is fighting a war, is going to take into account these rules, also given the fact that they are the weaker party. So, but again, I mean, we come back to the question that we were raising at the beginning. This is here about politics, and whether diplomacy takes into account what politics is about, and also sets political goals, whether diplomacy does that or not. I mean, that's of course that is extremely important. If it does not, the situation will continue, and we don't know when this will stop. And of course, I mean, the more Assad gains time, and the more he gets some resources, and is gambling to stay in power. This is gamble for resurrection.
But what about his staunch ally Russia, though? They beginning to lose patience over the last few weeks, haven't they? This could be key, couldn't it?
Well, at some point, we can expect that Assad will be so illegitimate as a regime that backing Assad will be uncomfortable, even for states such as Russia. But I don't think we have come to that point yet, and so that's also why I believe that multilateral diplomacy is so difficult to work, and again, there is no real community of states. There's just a society of states that have interests, but no, not really a collective intention of that community. So therefore, I mean, maybe the actions of certain states might be more effective than a community that is, to some extent, paralyzed. I mean, we have seen in other crises that the community of states hasn't reached the goals that it should have, or that it could have reached had there been more cohesion within that group. And I fear that's what's happening right now. But it's true that there can be a shift sometimes in opinions and interests. So states can change their mind, sure.
So perhaps Syria is more of a long game than we've seen elsewhere in the region when regimes have been brought down relatively quickly.
Yeah, because
there's
also
a certain impatience when we compare the situation
Syria
in Syria
is another game also because first of all, I mean, states, Western states, were betting on Syria. I mean, France had somehow a good relationship with Syria, and the bet was that Syria was there to stay. And also, there's another difference with other interventions such as Libya. It is also the military aspect of the situation. Intervening against Assad might not be as easy as intervening against Gaddafi. And the other issue is that if Syria crumbles, if Assad regime crumbles, it's true that in the region it will make substantial changes, more than what has happened in Libya. This will change, I mean, the relation with Israel, with Lebanon, with Iran. It's really a total redefinition of the region, and states are cautious. That's why, of course, I mean, they don't decide to intervene right away. Although the moment when this question will really be on the table, we're getting closer to that moment. But of course they do not, because it's really a huge gamble, because you don't know what the consequences of the intervention will be. But we will reach that point where the question will be raised.
And not to mention, of course, there are elections going on here in France next week. We've got an election in the United States later this year. There is a certain element of fatigue, and a certain element of the public's fatigue and not wanting their governments to intervene in these foreign conflicts any longer. That's playing a part as well, isn't it?
Well, when we're talking about military intervention, France's position is clear. We need a UN Security Council mandate to do that. We are not there. I mean, you remember that not so long ago, Russia and China vetoed 2 UN resolutions. few weeks after they agreed to a presidential statement, and then last Saturday a resolution. So we are progressing, but we are very far from a military intervention. We have observers on the ground, UN observers on the ground. Kofi Annan is going to report to the Security Council on Thursday. Let's hear what he's going to say, how it's progressing. I think there's a frustration also coming from Russia. That's why we see Russia evolving, I think, because they see that the regime is continuing its killing of its own population. The image of Russia in the Arab world has deteriorated a lot, and they see that, and it's not, they don't want that to happen. So I guess we see more unity in the international community.
And Philippe Laurenti, there hasn't been a great deal of enthusiasm for the Annan plan, but it is the only one we've got, isn't it? And at the moment, there doesn't appear to be a plan B.
Well, the plan B is a ferocious civil war with unpredictable outcomes. The Annan plan, as you say, is the only game in town. And if this doesn't work, feeble as it is in many ways, limping along, trying to lower the levels of violence and trying to get the forces separated, trying to get the political dialogue started, in which the Russians have the biggest investment. And they really are, in a sense, setting the pace, because without them, it doesn't move forward at all. With them, it does move forward. And they have put their shoulder to the wheel somewhat on this plan, because basically with Annan, they got what they had been insisting had to be the process all along, so they have to make it work. And indeed, this is the Russians' opportunity to show whether they can still be a player for their allies and for the region at large. And we will see how much they will give support to what they said had been indispensable.
Now, Philippe Belopian, I'll give the last word to you. We are running out of time, but is this the beginning of the end? A question we've asked many times before for the Assad regime.
Well, it's really not for Human Rights Watch to say, but maybe I'll use the opportunity to comment quickly on abuse committed by the opposition, because I want to make clear that, in fact, Human Rights Watch did document very serious abuse by the opposition. They should be investigated, they should be condemned. They cannot be excused by the violence committed by the government, but they cannot either be equated with the massive campaign the regime has launched against its own people, torturing children in some cases, killing people, crimes that we think are crimes against humanity. So serious crimes by the opposition, but by no means, can you compare them to the crackdown launched by the government.
All right, we'll end it there. Philippe Belopian at Human Rights Watch, many thanks indeed. Thanks to you, Geoffrey Laurenti at the Century Foundation. Ariel Kolonimas at CNRS, thanks to you. Vincent Floriani, many thanks indeed as well. Thanks to our other guests as well. Thanks to you for watching. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow for another France 24 debate. More news and headlines coming right up.